Hello, and welcome to Listening to the Verde, a program brought to you by Friends of the Verde River. I'm Nancy Steele, Executive Director of Friends of the Verde River. This program is designed to inform, inspire, and engage you about all things Verde River, all of the things that make the Verde grow and go, with flowing river, a healthy habitat, and engaged community supporters. Did you know that the Verde is fed by 10 major tributary streams and over 100 springs that keep it flowing? And that the highest point in the watershed is Humphreys Peak out near Flagstaff. The lowest point is where the Verde meets with the Salt River at about a 1,323 foot elevation. Today, we're talking with Jon Fuller, a hydrogeomorphologist and the author of Verde River Elegy, A Paddling Journey to the River's Edge, a book that was published in 2018 based on a 196-mile canoe trip from the headwaters of the Verde all the way to where the Verde meets with the Salt River. So Jon, welcome to our show.
Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Sure. And let's start off. Tell us about what a hydrogeomorphologist is. What actually do you do? What does that mean?
Yeah, so my degrees are in geology, so that's my background. I was a rocks guy, but I was more interested in dirt and rivers than I was in hard rock. And so I did my master's thesis on something called paleoflood hydrology, which is looking at geologic evidence of floods on rivers in Arizona. And the Verde was one of the rivers I studied in my master's thesis, in my master's work. So I came to hydrology, the study of water, from the study of Earth, basically. And I found my career kind of in between civil engineering, hydrology, and geology. And that's what geomorphology is. Basically, you're looking at the part of the Earth that you can see, the surface of the Earth. So rivers, caves, soils, things like that. And for me, I've always been a rivers person, and that just, it struck me at my core, and I've stuck there.
What made you a river person?
You know, I think you're born with it. As a kid, my mother was forever telling me, get out of the ditch in front of the house, because it was by the highway. But I couldn't stop going in there with a shovel and making little channels and dams and failing them and watching what happened. And you know, I'd spend my Saturdays going up to Rainbow Creek a mile from my house and walking down the creek and hopping on boulders and, you know, catching crawdads and frogs and looking at the fish. And that's just something about rivers just speaks to my soul. I love rivers.
You can always play in a river.
There's just so much to see. And
yeah. So what's a favorite memory of yours with a river, any river?
You know, one of my favorite days ever on a river, and I've been on a lot of rivers, was paddling the Verde downstream of Gap Creek on the way to Childs. And it was fall, so it was, you know, beautiful temperature, sky with puffy clouds, and I'm going through this long rock garden. The water's relatively shallow. It was a fairly low water trip, and I'm just picking my way through the boulders, going through the current, breezes in my face, fall colors, blue sky, clouds. And I just had this sense at this time, this is just a perfect moment. And it's kind of one of my happy places. When things are going bad, I'll go back in my mind to that moment of sitting on the Verde, picking my way through this boulder garden. And that's just one of them. And I could go on and on and on. There's so many happy things on rivers. So.
Yeah, no, I'd love to hear more. I want to talk about, we're going to talk about the trip that you've written about in your book. But there was another thing from the book that I was really curious about that I thought I wanted to ask you to expand on, which is you talk about whether or not the river is navigable.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's kind of a tough concept. I mean, of course, you put a boat on it, I can navigate it, but why is that such a contentious issue in Arizona and for the Verde?
So believe it or not, I've been involved in a legal case since 1992 on the Verde. Also the Salt and the Gila are part of this. In fact, every stream in Arizona they've asked this question on, and it's a very specific legal question. So if a river is navigable, then the bed of that river belongs to the people of the state. It belongs to the state, and it's held in trust. So it's different than any other kind of state land. But but it's publicly owned and it's to be preserved as a highway so people can use it whenever they want. And you, for instance, you can't put a fence across it. You can't say, no, this is no trespassing in my private property. The river itself is available for everybody. But what does it mean to be navigable? And people argue about whether it has to be a commercial use. What is commercial use? Is, you know, the actual federal law says trade and travel on water. So travel on water, what is that? I sit in a boat by myself, I'm traveling on water. Does that make it navigable? People would say, no, it needs to be something more commercial. Something needs to be a financial transaction. Other folks say, well, no, there is a financial transaction. I drove in my car to the river, I bought a boat, I bought gas, I bought a lunch, I paid a shuttle driver. Those are all commercial activities. And it has to do with who controls these rivers. Is it private land or is it everybody's land? And it's been a contentious issue. 4 times the state has decided that the Verde River is not navigable, and 3 of those 4 times the case was overturned. Currently it's working its way up through the appeals court, heading towards possibly the Supreme Court to decide again.
So is this going to be decided in Arizona's Supreme Court or the federal Supreme Court?
It has once gone to the Arizona Supreme Court and it's been sent back down, once to the Court of Appeals and sent back down. The last time after it was sent back down at the Court of Appeals level, there was an attempt to appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court, but they missed a filing deadline by a day. They read the paperwork wrong and missed it, so it came back down and it never went to. So I would assume that this would go to the U.S. Supreme Court this time.
Okay. So let's say I buy a piece of land and my land crosses the river, so I own land on both sides of the river. Tell me what the consequence would of it being navigable or not navigable to what I can do with that section of a river. Because I've heard people say, I own the river.
Mm-hmm. And right now, under Arizona law, they do. Now, whether that's a legal claim or not is another matter. In many cases, folks have paid taxes on that land. The way the legislation was written the last time I looked, they would get a refund for those taxes they've paid on that portion of land if it were found to be public trust land. But if it were navigable, a couple of things could happen. One would be they would not have the ability to tell people, you cannot paddle through this. You still have the ability to say, you can't come off the river and camp or throw trash on my land, but you can travel through on the water. And there's some slight complications in there, that some nuances and whatnot. One of the more complicating things is that in Arizona, water rights are tied to the land. So the question of what it does to your water right if the land were public rather than private is a different one. And there are folks who are concerned that it would undo many of the water rights settlements and they'd have to be redone, which would be a huge mess. I mean, many attorneys would send their kids through very expensive colleges based on all the legal work that would go on according to that. Yeah. So that's a potential ramification. But for the rest of us, it means we get to enjoy rivers, and no one can say, you can't come here. And I've faced many times with our barbed wire fences. On my last trip down the Gila in New Mexico, I met up with a very angry landowner who literally threatened to kill me for being on his land. And he didn't seem like he was kidding. We came to an agreement after a while, but it was a scary time.
Yeah.
So,
wow.
Yeah.
Well, this is a topic we could probably spend a long time talking about, but
30 years.
I'm going to switch back to your book,
Yeah.
Verde River Elegy, that you wrote, you published in 2018 based on a trip you took in 2017. And you said that you believe you were the first person, perhaps, to do it as one continuous trip?
Yes. So my trip was the longest continuous trip that I know of. There were some others that came close. Jim Slingluff did it in the mid-'80s, but on that trip, he started at Morgan Ranch, which is about mile 4, and he paddled down to the confluence. He's the only one I know that it's done all of that much in a continuous trip. There was a guy named Bob Williams who lived he's a school teacher in Prescott. Both Jim and Bob are now gone, died too young. And Bob did it in sections and wrote a very nice guidebook that's out of print, but probably the best one's available. And he's the only one I know that's tried to canoe the part that's right below Sullivan Dam, that 1 mile stretch and he tried. He did not succeed.
Yeah.
He said it was a humiliating thing. He basically dragged his boat after a half mile going, I'm glad I'm still alive.
Oh, wow.
I found a story after I published the book of some kayakers who actually rappelled in from Sullivan Dam during a flood, at the tail end of a flood. And they floated it in kayaks. In fact, the water was so fast, they were at Childs, I think, on day 3. So they knocked out almost 100 miles in 3 days.
Yeah.
And if you know John Parsons, he's done most of the river as well. And he had the idea, he told me, of in 93, at the tail end of that flood, paddling from Sullivan Dam all the way down to the Salt, to the Gila, and out to Yuma, but decided at the last minute not to do it. But as far as I know, even in all the historical research I've done, I've never found anybody else who's paddled all of it continuously in a single trip.
So crazy idea.
Crazy idea.
Crazy idea. So
what a good idea.
What made you want to do it? Why'd you do it in 2017? That was when you did it, right?
Yeah, so I'd actually tried a couple of times before, and I'd had some injuries or some work issues or family issues that I had the trip all planned, was ready to go, and I had to cancel the trip. 2017, the stars aligned and I was able to do it. The reason I did the trip, there were a couple of reasons. One, I love canoe trips, and I'd done all the Verde in pieces before. And every time I'd finish a section, I'd be putting in somewhere and looking upstream going, oh, I could have done that. And I'd finish the day or the trip or whatever, and I'd look downstream and think, well, I should be going, what's around that next bend? So I wanted to do all of it.
Yeah.
And I was fascinated by Jim Slingloff's trip in the mid-'80s. Thought that was a really cool thing. But I think the primary reason was I'd been studying the Verde since my master's work in 1984. And I'd seen a lot of changes in the Verde, some good, some bad. But most notably, the flow has been declining significantly over the years. And looking at those trends, I felt like unless we do something different, the Verde is going to be gone someday. And I don't know that if we're on the track we're on, I don't think my grandkids would be able to do this trip. So I took the trip to say goodbye to the Verde, to document what it was at that time, so that someday somebody could either look back and say, wow, I'm glad somebody took pictures and wrote a story about what the Verde was once like so we can remember, but hopefully so that we can look back and go, wow, it was at the edge and we brought it back. But anyways, it was my trip to say goodbye.
That's kind of sad.
It is.
And inspiring at the same time.
Yeah.
Wow. We're going to have to take a break right now. And when we come back, we're going to bring in Isaac Dudley and talk about a new project that the two of you have cooked up. So join us. Again, we'll be right back after this short break. Thanks for listening to the Verde and welcome back to our show. I'm here with Jon Fuller, author of Verde River Elegy, a book about paddling the entire length of the Verde River in one go. And we've also brought in Isaac Dudley to join us to talk about a new project that the two of them have cooked up. Isaac Dudley was born in the Verde Valley and grew up here. He graduated from Northern Arizona University. And he is an accomplished photographer and videographer with experience in grassroots marketing and outreach. Isaac is also an employee of Friends of the Verde River, and I'm really pleased to welcome the both of you to the show to talk about what you're doing next. So I'll let you guys decide which one of you wants to kick this off. But as I understand it, you are following up on Jon's 2017 trip and you're again going to paddle the Verde from the beginning to end, but not all in one go this time, right?
Right, yeah. So, yeah, like you said, I grew up in the area, and so I spent a lot of time on the river. My dad was an angler, and he loved to canoe, so as a kid, we would try to get out all the time. But still, I haven't seen every section of the Verde, and reading Jon's book, it creates this kind of urgency where you just want to grab your paddle and start paddling like there's no time to waste, you know. So that's one of the inspirations for this project. We are, over the next 6 months, planning on section floating every section of the Verde River from the headwaters to the reservoirs in Phoenix, somewhat following the Verde River Elegy and being guided by Jon. It's been really awesome so far. We've got a few sections under our belt, and our goal is to be able to share some of the threats and challenges as well as the solutions that are being worked on a different platform so that we can reach a bigger audience, hopefully.
So Jon, we ended our last segment you talking about the reason why you wrote Verde River Elegy, why you paddled the Verde to try and inspire people to save this precious river. Any hope now? Do you have some more feelings of hope?
You know, there's always reasons to hope. This section of the Verde that we're sitting by today is so much better than it was 20 years ago, partly in major work, the Friends of the Verde and, you know, its ancestor organizations that combined. They've just done so much to try to save water, to use it more efficiently, to clean up the river, to help pull out the invasives. So those things are just really, those are bright signs. You know, we still have, in my mind, unfortunately, that looming threat of everybody sticking those wells into the ground and sucking more water out. And the more water we take out and we consume, the less there is for the otters and the beavers.
Yeah. So
there's still that issue that's hanging over there. So we're doing great things when there's still a battle ahead of us.
If I could ask you to just back up a sec, you just said something that you said that the flow in the river has something to do with people putting wells in the ground. Now, talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I'll put on my hydrologist hat here. So you started the introduction today into, you know, did you know these perennial streams that flow into it and these 100 springs? So that water bubbling up out of the ground in the springs is coming from somewhere, right? So it's water that flowed in a stream and sunk into the ground, or it rained on the ground and sunk into the ground, and it's been stored in the aquifers or the bedrock underneath the river, and it's been spewing out over time. Some of that water, it may be thousands of years from the time it was a raindrop soaked in and got to the aquifer and then discharged in these springs, sometimes quicker, sometimes longer. But it's traveling that path from raindrop to spring to river, and along that path, it can be intercepted. So that reservoir of storage underneath the ground can be depleted by people sticking a well into it and pumping it out. And every drop of water that gets pumped out is a drop of water that can't eventually get its way to the river. So it's like your bank account. You know, you take out more than you're putting in, and there's less for you to use. So. And that's what's happening with the Verde. Yeah.
Okay. So I wanted to clarify that in case anyone was curious why you were talking about wells when we were here to talk about the river.
Yeah.
So let's go back to this current section float that you guys are doing. How many months are you into it? When did you start? How many segments have you paddled?
Well, Jon put together most of our itinerary. It's really well planned out. Our whole plan is 6 months with 22 individual days on the water. So far, we've got 4 sections done. I think we're 2 months in, right? About. And then we'll be, working for a long time, editing the message, trying to get the story right. And so Jon will be a great team member for that whole process. I can't wait to have him put on his writer cap to help me storyboard the rest of the project. And Kate too, Jon's wife, is also another accomplished writer. So we've got the team, and it's really exciting to have the chance to tell this story in a way that I feel like hasn't been told before.
So you're filming as you go?
Yes, we are. It's going to be a short mini documentary, ideally 15 to 20 minutes, that we will hopefully be submitting to film festivals. That's the dream, anyway.
Maybe on the Wild and Scenic Rivers circuit, huh?
Yeah. And when he says we, he means him. So I'm being the mule. I'm taking him downriver and doing some of the logistics, but this is the man with the eye and the camera, and he sees things that I go right by all the time. Actually, we went into a run. He said, "Did you see that?" And I'm like, "No, I was looking at the water." And so it's going to be pretty. It's going to be a pretty film. And
nice.
I have a lot of pictures in the book, but there's so much that a still photo just can't capture.
Right.
The movement of water and the wind and the leaves and the colors and the panoramic. That it'll come out really well in a film.
Yeah. So, are we going to see Red again? Red's your canoe?
Red is dead.
Oh. I'm
sad to report. The prologue that you're talking about did some damage to his hull. He was still floatable, and I have a lot of happy memories with Red, but I don't trust him on wilderness trips anymore. His hull's going to come apart. Mm. He's been replaced by Blue.
Blue?
Yes.
Okay.
And this trip will actually be yellow. I haven't named that boat yet. I've had it a long time, but it doesn't have a name, but I'm going in a yellow boat. So.
But after Red and Blue, wouldn't yellow be the name of the new boat?
Somehow it just doesn't roll off the tongue. I don't know if I got to call it Jons or like for the French or Amarillo or to go with the Verde, but I don't know.
But he's a noble warrior, so it has to be a good name.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
It can't be, yellow.
Yellow has the hint of the smell of cowardice about it, right? So
okay.
That would be its driver, not the boat. So.
Hardly.
Yeah, yeah. So what other stories can you tell me about what you've been doing with the river?
One of my biggest surprises on the Verde was the otters. I'm up in the headwaters. I'm at about mile 4, just past the Morgan Ranch, and I'm going this little chute that's 3 feet wide and maybe 8-9 inches deep, and I see this kind of ridge of water moving away from me, and I've seen big fish do that on the salt when it's shallow, and I thought, oh, it's some sort of carp or some big fish in there, or a catfish or something. And so I was kind of grabbing at my camera to see if I can get a picture of it, and all of a sudden it stops and an otter sticks its head up. I'm like, there's otters. And I saw otters every section. The only section I didn't see an otter was between the White Bridge and the Clear Creek wrap. And I saw beavers in there and a bunch of other cool stuff. And I know there are otters in there, but I didn't see one that day. Every other day, all the way down to the salt. Over 80 otters.
Oh, wow.
And I love otters. They're I think my favorite animal. And, they'd see me. And at one point I saw this little romp of otters, and there was like 6 or 8 of them in a group, and they came and they sniffed at my boat. And I realized as I was sitting there watching them, trying not to disturb them, all of a sudden I realized, ooh, my food bag's open. I wonder if otters eat dehydrated food. So I stood up to look at them, and they saw me, they all periscoped down, and they were gone.
Oh, that's cool. I guess I don't have to ask you what your favorite Verde animal is. You just said it's the otter. That's great. What? I guess this is a question for both of you. What have you learned from the Verde?
You start that one off, Jon.
Yeah. So he's lived his life here. So, I talk about the Verde disappearing, and I guess when you get to be my age and you see things disappearing, you realize just how precious life and rivers are, and water's precious. And we as a society made decisions that have taken us to this point. But I think if we discovered the Verde today, and completely untouched, and you said, okay, how are we going to treat the Verde? I think we would undo a lot of those decisions. They no longer make sense. And so there's arguments for how we got to where we are that are legal, and they make some degree of sense. But I think we just need to unplug at some point and say, we need to redo this. Our values are different than they were 200 years ago. What's important to us now, this river is so much more important to us than some of the other things that threaten it. Mm-hmm. So that to me is, and you got to get out and see this place. I guess that's another lesson. As I've talked to people about the Verde, doing promotions for the book and whatnot, you show them pictures and they're like, I had no idea that this was here. I live in this state. I've lived in this state my whole life, they might say, and I've never seen this canyon. It's just astounding. It is truly, I would say, it is the most beautiful place in Arizona. You know, and I've been down Grand Canyon a number of times. It's spectacular. The Verde just it grabs your heart.
Yeah. Isaac?
Well, you know, like John said, I grew up here. And so one of the things to me that I have learned, that I feel from the Verde is what it means to have a sense of place. And so I say that, yeah, just as somebody who, you know, has left the area and come back and has underappreciated my community on some level, as all young people do. And so to come back to the town and and feel like there's this awesome thing that we all have, that's a real big sense of pride for me. And so that's sort of what drives my work at Friends, and the pride that I have there, and the new project that John and I are working on is this sense of place and pride and wanting to protect what we have.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, we've got just a short time left. Any parting thoughts for our audience today?
Well, I've sure had a great time on the river with you so far, John. And I just want to say thank you, first of all, to you for taking the time. And I can't wait to see where the rest of this project goes.
Yeah, I was feeling pretty gloomy when you called about just, you know, with COVID and everything, everyone's been stuck at home, and this is a great way to social distance and be out just the two of us in the middle of nowhere. So this was a lifesaver. I'm really, really looking forward to seeing some of these places again. And last time down, I tend to paddle fast and hard. That's just the way I'm wired. And this trip is going to be forced to slow down to take pictures and film things. And so I'm really excited about savoring the river this time down.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Well, I'm really looking forward to seeing the film. You think 2021, 2022? What do you think?
I think we might be able to pull it off in 2021. But no promises, because I want it to be good. It's going to be good.
Yeah, it'll be great. Well, thanks so much for watching this episode of Listening to the Verde with our special guests, Jon Fuller, author of Verde River Elegy, and Isaac Dudley, an employee and a very capable photographer and videographer at Friends of the Verde River. Thank you so much. To learn more about the topics we've talked about today and watch more episodes of Listening to the Verde, you can go to verderiver.org/listening. Thank you so much.
Listening to the Verde is brought to you by Friends of the Verde River. Please visit verderiver.org/listening for more videos and resources.